Welcome. Today is Monday of the second week in Advent. The 2 candles are lit, and we're going to join Tabitha again. Remember, she's clinging to the bush on the hillside. Today's chapter is entitled Secrets. Tabitha felt her fingers slipping down the slick branches of the bush. At the same time, the bush was pulling out of the hillside, so she didn't know which would be the end of her, only that it would happen very soon. She heard the footsteps of the devil above her on the road and knew that his searchings would soon lead to her. "Small girl," the man hissed again, "I know you are here. Take care you don't step on an asp. They are everywhere here." Tabitha shivered at the thought of stepping on a poisonous snake, but knew the man was just trying to get her to make a noise. The bush gave a little jerk as another root pulled free, and she dropped a few more inches. The sandal on her left foot was thrown loose, and she felt the cool night air on her bare toes. With one last snap, the bush pulled out of the hillside. Tabitha slid down the slope and over the edge. This time she could not hold her screams inside. As she fell out into the open air, she let out a loud cry. But it was only a moment before she hit soft earth, and she realized the hill she had been hanging from was only slightly taller than herself. Some other time she might have laughed at her folly, but her cry had caught the attention of the villain, and now she could see his shadow coming toward her in the moonlight. Tabitha grabbed her sandal and held it up like a sword as she backed away from the man, fear trembling in every bone. He jumped from the road to the point where she had landed moments before. As he flew through the air, his tunic and overcoat billowed in the wind, making him seem larger than life. He landed with a thud, never taking his eyes off Tabitha. "He has the eyes of a weasel," Tabitha thought. Greasy bits of meat stuck in his beard. "Now, small girl," he whispered, "you will come with me and make me a prophet." Tabitha had backed all the way to the edge of the sea of death now. She felt the water wash over her feet, and wondered if the sea or the man would kill her first. Suddenly she decided that she wasn't going to let either of them get her. Reaching to the pebbled earth, she picked up a smooth stone larger than her hand. She drew her arm back and threw the rock as hard as if she were trying to kill a lion. The stone hit the man in the elbow, and he howled in pain. But it only made him more mad. Stepping quickly toward Tabitha, he yelled terrible threats, but Tabitha threw another rock, hitting him on the shoulder. Then she began pelting him with the stones, firing as rapidly as she could. The rocks hit the man in the knee and the chest and the neck. Finally, a stone hit the man square on his ear, and he dropped to the ground, holding his head in his arms. Deciding this was a good time to run, Tabitha slipped on her sandal and dashed off up the beach. When she'd run as far as her breath would allow, Tabitha dropped down behind a large rock. Forcing herself to gasp for breath quietly, she listened for any sound of footsteps. Hearing nothing for a time, she decided it was safe. And that's when the tears came. Tabitha sobbed as quietly as she could into the folds of her tunic. She cried at the loss of her father, cried at the cruelty of the Romans, and cried out her fear of the attack in the night. It was some time later that Tabitha decided she needed to start walking. She had no blanket, and the night air coming off the sea was chilled. Better to be on the road at night, she thought, than during the day when she might meet others. So she started off, the sea on her right, to the place of the monks. Holding her arms tightly around herself for warmth, Tabitha walked on through the night. The moon was out, although only a third part of it shone with light, but it was enough to see by, and enough to tell that no dangers awaited her ahead. All through the night Tabitha walked. Her legs began to ache after a time, but she didn't even notice enough to complain to herself. She had no water, and thirst scratched at her throat as she walked. But neither aching legs nor a dry mouth were new to her, and she didn't allow these discomforts to slow her down. Toward morning, Tabitha was finding it difficult to keep her eyes open. She kept telling her eyelids to obey, but they would not. Several times she stumbled and almost fell to the ground as sleep took over her mind. Yet she still continued trudging ahead, one foot in front of the other, not knowing where she was going, but knowing she had to get there nonetheless. The sun had just peeked over the sea of death to her right when Tabitha stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes forgetting all about being sleepy. To her left, and a short distance off the road, was a walled compound. At least it used to be a walled compound. This wall was nothing but burned rubble in several places, and it didn't even have a proper gate. It must be Qumran, Tabitha decided. Slipping down behind some rocks, Tabitha sat and thought. Her father had said that girls weren't allowed in Qumran, and yet she had to go there to find help. How could she get inside the gate and find help when they wouldn't let her in because she was a... Remembering En-Gedi, an idea flew into Tabitha's head. Immediately she took the cloth Hasba had given her and folded it into the shape worn by boys. Then she once again stuffed all her hair up under the hat and pulled it tightly down so it wouldn't fall off. Next she rubbed some dirt on her face because boys are always dirty. Boys think they're superior to everyone, she thought, so I must have that same attitude if my plan is to work. She stood and practiced taking long steps the way boys do, folding her arms in front of her. The sun was fully awake now, and Tabitha climbed back up on the road and then up a trail toward what looked like the main gate of Qumran. As she did so, she heard a shout, and then saw a man standing in a tower where the walls met in a corner. The man was pointing at her and shouting to someone behind him. He turned and stared at her as she approached, then finally turned away again. This time she heard the words he spoke to those behind him. "All is well," the man was saying. Tabitha continued on to the gate and was met by one short, round man and one tall, thin one. "What is it you want?" the short man said gruffly. Tabitha swallowed hard. She had expected a kinder greeting. Lowering her voice just a touch, she answered, "My father has been arrested by the Romans, and I seek help in freeing him." "There's no one here who can help you, boy," the short man said with a wave of his hand. "We are monks and do not get involved in such matters. Now away with you, off to Jericho or such." Tabitha was beginning to panic and forgot to lower her voice when she spoke. "But my father said I should come here for help. He said to look for a monk playing the part of a fool." The little fat man looked up at his friend and said in disgust, "Nathan!" Shaking his head, he said, "Very well. The one you seek is not here, but you may wait for him a day or two." And then wagging his finger in Tabitha's face, he added, "But no longer." The man turned then and looked across the compound. Finally, he spotted a boy about Tabitha's age and yelled, "Bartholomew!" The boy ran over, skidding to a stop next to the fat man. "Yes, Rabbi," the boy said, and Tabitha could not believe the mean man was a teacher. "Take care of this boy. He waits for Nathan. Make sure he knows our rules." "Yes, Rabbi," the boy said again. Then the two men turned and stomped off. Tabitha was disappointed. She wanted to ask the rabbi about the fool, but it would have to wait until later, she decided, until he was in a better mood. "My name is Bartholomew," the boy said. "And what is your name?" Tabitha caught herself just in time and had to think quickly. "Tabitha," she said, giving a common boy's name. As they walked through the compound, Bartholomew asked what Tabitha was doing all alone in the desert, and she told him how her father and uncles were arrested by Romans looking for a fool and a boy. Her new friend became silent after that, but Tabitha didn't ask why. Finally he said, "Tabitha, I am the boy they were looking for. I was rescued from death by my friend Nathan, who often plays the part of a fool." Bartholomew looked at Tabitha in the eye and added, "Your father was arrested because of me." Tabitha was quiet for a moment and then said, "My father was arrested because of the Romans, not because of you. Do not feel badly for that which you could not control." Bartholomew nodded and then began teaching Tabitha the many rules of Qumran, all the while believing she was a boy. This made Tabitha feel guilty. Bartholomew had been honest with her about his role in her father's arrest, but she dared not reveal her true identity for fear she would be pushed out into the desert. All that changed a few minutes later when Bartholomew was explaining about meals. "There are only 2 meals a day here," he said, "but the worst part is we all have to bathe before every meal." "You bathe together?" Tabitha gasped. "Yeah, but," Bartholomew said, "but it is all right. There are no women or girls here." Tabitha now knew she could keep quiet no longer. "Bartholomew," she said, "I have a secret I must tell you." Tabitha has been hiding her true identity from her new friend. Even though Bartholomew has been honest with her, up until now she felt like she had to pretend to be someone else. We are often like that ourselves, especially when it comes to letting others know we love Jesus. Sometimes we're afraid we'll be laughed at if our friends know we're Christians. So it's easier to hide our true identities and pretend not to know Jesus. But God can only use us and bless us when we are open and honest about our relationship with Him. As the story in Acts goes, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished and took note that these men had been with Jesus. Unless it's a game everyone is playing together, hiding is never any fun. In fact, it can be kind of scary. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone just knew you were a Christian? Then people could look at the way you love others and say, "This person has been with Jesus."